Welcome back to the Game Theory series. We covered some game theory fundamentals in Chapter 1 and covered some approaches in Chapter 2 that can be modeled to fit different contexts depending on the desired outcome. We then covered some applications in applying those approaches and potential models through some business case studies, demonstrating the use of game theory in strategic decision making in Chapter 3. In this chapter, we'll explore the application of game theory as a revenue assurance and pricing tool. But first, as always, let's go through a recap of what we covered in chapters 1 to 3. Right, let's get going with chapter 4. We'll be using the same property automation case study we used in chapter 3. So we'll start with a recap of this case study. For this game theory in revenue assurance exploration, we'll use the customer type B2B, property managers, sub-customer B2C, tenants, for the value proposition Smart Building Tenant Comfort Services. Let's first start with a reminder of what revenue assurance entails as discussed in our revenue assurance series. If you want a full refresh, feel free to go through our revenue assurance series, free on YouTube. Okay, so let's get into it. So let's map out a small, straightforward scenario within the context of the case study. We'll start by narrowing down the scope of our case study into three sub scenarios. In the first scenario, our platform's B2B customer is a multi dwelling student accommodation property manager. Obviously, their main customers are the building owners. That's who they primarily monetize. And in turn, they provide a service by monetizing the building owner's direct customer, the tenant. In this case, the student. These buildings house all types of students: self funding students, students supported by parents, students of scholarships or bursaries of sorts, loan funded students, students that are on government study assistance, and so on. In this case, one of your objectives in employing tenant comfort and lifestyle services via automation is to drive stickiness. You want to ensure that students stay in your accommodation for the entire duration of their studies. This is not as easy as it seems because a lot of the students that stay in off campus accommodation typically do so because they were not able to secure on campus accommodation. So, if the opportunity presents itself in the coming years, perhaps having been on a waiting list the year before, they would likely take that chance in order to fully experience campus life. For them, campus life means not having to worry about commuting to campus and being able to use the library and all other amenities at any time of the day, including late at night, and so on. So you have a tough job of keeping them around by making sure they want to keep wanting to stay in this accommodation, even when what they consider to be better options become available to them. On the other hand, if the student is older, perhaps a master's student or someone reinventing themselves via education after a stint in the working world, the same thinking might not apply. They might actually prefer to live in the adult world without all the campus fanfare outside of education attainment activities. So that's something to think about as well. You also have to consider that students are by definition broke and therefore often don't directly carry the full financial responsibility of their studies. This then means that in a lot of instances, they may not necessarily get to make all the decisions where finances are involved, such as where to live, for example, if multiple options are on the table. Chances are the party who is footing the bill will be the one deciding, and their motivations for choosing a particular option will be very different from that of the student. If the student is on a student loan or bursary, then they might have some degree of control in choosing where to live, and their only consideration budget wise would be the accommodation budget ceiling mandated by the funding party. If the student is sponsored by the parent, other factors come into play over and above the cost. Issues such as the perceived level of safety of the off campus area or building, for example, come into play. Now, in this case, other things that matter to the student in terms of comfort and lifestyle might actually matter to the funding party because parents often tend to care about how their children feel. So the student has some level of control over the decision process. All of this is to say that there are various factors and elements to consider in the process of driving this stickiness objective for the primary monetized customer. The second scenario involves corporate buildings. So these are buildings that are places of business where the property owner might be someone else. That is, the company conducting business there is actually leasing the building from someone else, or the company itself owns the building. Your customer as the property management automation platform is the property management company. You are monetizing them and they are monetizing the building owner. Here, what you are trying to do is use these automation services in terms of enhancing comfort and convenience to the inhabitants of the building, the employees of the company in question, in order to secure a long term relationship with the building owner for the property management company, thus guaranteeing a long contract term for yourself as the automation platform company. So while the employees are enjoying the benefits of the value proposition from an automation perspective, they don't make the final decision in terms of management, contract extensions, and so on, although their word might count for something from an employee wellness perspective. Our third scenario involves the subgroup of hospitality establishments. Here, the setup can take many shapes, but for now, we'll take the shape that the hotel owners manage their own establishment fully with a few outsourced functions such as sanitation. They use your platform directly with the objective of elevating guest experience as a competitive advantage play against rivals. They too want stickiness. They want their guest to pick them and only them when looking for a hotel. They want an elevated customer experience via personalization, understanding that the same guest might have different needs each time they stay at the establishment, and they want to be able to not only identify these needs and meet them, but also to anticipate these needs so they are better prepared to meet them. Now, as one might imagine, explaining an experience to someone is not the same as them actually experiencing it for themselves. It is the reason why ice cream samples run out so fast in the mall, and why the said ice cream seems to sell out on the back of giving away these samples for free. Unless, of course, the ice cream is made of seaweed or spinach. For every person that looks at a herb and says, hey, how about we smoke this stuff, creating many a peaceful and blissful moment for millions of people, there's always that one person that would look at chicken broth and say, hey, this would make a delightful frozen yogurt, creating something that would explain why dogs bite people. For this reason, we give out a few credits for free to enable the new tenant to experience the comfort and convenience that comes with these automations. Automations can be anything that makes a person's life more comfortable and more convenient, and all of them require different levels of data to execute a fully hyper personalized experience. Personalization happens at different levels because people are just not the same, regardless of whether they have the same interests, behaviors, and are of the same stage in life. Two 40-year-olds who are married, have small kids, and are into fitness are not the same. One might be an early riser and one might be a night owl. So, already, from a lifestyle automation perspective, their needs can be miles apart. Perhaps you're thinking, well, that's a behavioral factor that can be added as part of the profile group. But then it only takes two or more small differences to end up with two completely different profiles, which then means two different sets of needs. One has three children, one has two. One has a working wife, one has a housewife. One has a special needs child, for example. Before you know it, you're barreling down the hyper personalization route. So, might as well save yourself the grief and start there. Mapping customer journeys for three or four predefined profile groups is an old, stale, and ineffective way of doing things. Hyperpersonalization via AI. That's where we are now. You predefine the profile groups to have a reference for your customer value option design based on your target customer attributes and let AI do the rest.